Is it live? All right, cool. Well, what's up, everybody? Y'all should be able to hear me on this, and then on this too. Cool. I'm just gonna go back and check the YouTube channel because this is, as you can tell, well, as you'll see in a second here, it's a whole new Sir Hunts. This is gonna be just a fun live stream. It's really a test, right? Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, cool. Awesome. Let me do this. Yeah, so this is kind of like a test live stream. Um, Obviously I am downstairs. My children are sleeping. My girlfriend is sleeping. The entire house is at rest except for the cats and the dog. Um, but yeah, so which one's better? Lord of the Rings, House of the Dragon. Let's see how many people we got watching. I don't think I've done a live stream this early in quite some time. There's 6 people watching. That's what's up. Good morning. Good morning. Let me adjust my hat. Once I once I get a streaming microphone, I'll sound better, and I won't have to hold the microphone the whole time. Shout out to Joe Mama, John Rod, Carlo Wagner, and Will Hunt 207. What's up, everybody? I actually do have some talking points I want to make. Not as many graphics, so I photoshopped the Hobbit scenes with the House of the Dragon cast because it's funny. And it's hilarious. I didn't even have to adjust their height. They are literally halflings compared to the human cast members of House of the Dragon. Alright. Let's start with why is the chat not refreshing? I saw people typing out. This chat always be doing that. If the chat doesn't refresh, I'ma just close it out. Alright. Okay, so let's start with Samwise versus Samwell. Alright? So Samwell Tarly embodies all of the characteristics of the Hobbit, minus the bravery. And I don't mean the Hobbit like the book The Hobbit. I mean hobbits in general, right? So they are a cheery folk, right? They like to eat. They like to sleep. Um, they aren't necessarily the most learned individuals, but for the most part, people constantly underestimate them, right? So you have Sam at the wall. He's in A Song of Ice and Fire, rather, switching from Lord of the Rings. He's he's a learned individual, but he's also got a fear that the main hobbits tend to get over, right? But there's a fear that goes along with being a hobbit because you're a halfling, so literally everybody in the world is bigger than you are. And there's one thing that's interesting I'm learning from the Silmarillion. Apparently, in the beginning, right, in the first age, um, elves and humans were pretty similar. Muscle composition, size, and stuff. Obviously, humans lived much shorter lives, um, but they could be killed in the flesh, like elves. And then obviously they have the tendency to be darker. But anyway, Sam at the wall likes to eat. He likes first lunch. He likes second lunch. Sam is a hobbit. He's fat, right? Um, a direct character comparison would be, Sam in Lord of the Rings ends up finishing what? Well, no, that's more of it. Let me organize my thoughts here. All right. This was like a spur of the moment. I've been wanting to do this for a while, but I should probably have read more of the Lord of the Rings um, to prepare for it. Uh, I would say um, let me look at if we just did okay. Let me switch the whole orientation of how I'm trying to think of this. I'm trying to find comparisons when which it's very clear, right? Um, Sam from A Song of Ice and Fire doesn't just embody Samwise from Lord of the Rings, but also Frodo and Bilbo as well, right? With the writing of the books, going on an adventure. Bilbo is hesitant at first, but then he loves it, right? Sam has never really liked it. In that sense, is kind of more realistic, uh, because someone who is, I guess, that opposed to going on adventure, doing certain things like Bilbo is in The Hobbit. And I haven't actually read The Hobbit. I've just seen the movies. I know I'm a jackass. I'm going to go back after I finish Silmarillion, but uh, it's more realistic because Sam kind of keeps that fear with him the whole way. Like, yeah, he remembers he killed a White Walker, but he knows the truth of it is that it's an accident. He got lucky, right? He used dragon glass. That's what killed the White Walker. And so he's more realistic, I guess, in that sense. Okay, let's do this. Let's do straight up inspiration from Lord of the Rings that George took, right? So names, right? You have Drogo, Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones is in the Song of Ice and Fire is this Dothraki Mongolian madman who is very similar to the I would say Apaches in America, but also the Huns over in Asiatic Europe area, right? But that name, Drogo, that's actually Frodo's dad's name, right? And like in the beginning of the story, in the Fellowship, Frodo is called Frodo, son of Drogo. I don't even know if Drogo, Frodo's father, is still alive. I would assume that he isn't because Frodo has an extended life. Like Bilbo ends up living to be 131, or he lives longer than that, but he makes it to 131, and then they depart across the ocean to go to the undying elven lands, right? Um, Also Tyrion, right? Tyrion, that sounds crazy. There's not obviously Drogo. Khal Drogo is probably nothing like Frodo's father, right? But the name. Same with this. Tyrion, right, is actually Tyrion upon Tuna is a location that in the early part of Silmarillion a lot of events happen. Tyrion upon Tuna, it's a city, and Tyrion is obviously one of the main characters of A Song of Ice and Fire. You could technically call him the main because he's got the most POV chapters. Um, Not that much like Tyrion isn't riding on a fish, but kind of small relation. Tyrion, like in medieval days, is it's this type of ink that's created from crushing up snails, and it makes this Tyrion purple color, which is like this royal color. Tyrion in A Song of Ice and Fire often wears this color, or has worn it in his more recent A Dance with Dragon chapters. Not really related to a Lord of the Rings there. Here's one that you don't really expect until you start reading it. Incest! The elves fuck each other. Cousins totally fuck each other, right? So, uh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. I didn't realize they were all fucking each other, dude. Like totally. Like obviously Tolkien doesn't go into explicit sex scenes like George does, but the elves are very much incestuous. Not as like brother and sister like the Targaryens in A Song of Ice and Fire, but the elves totally do it with other elves that are kindred of them. So yeah, that's interesting. Um, there's actually one instance where fuck, there's so many names in Silmarillion. It's insane. It's one of the hardest things. One of the hardest reasons why I think it's hard for people to get through is that there's so many names. There will be like 156 names, and 150 of them don't really play that massive of a role, right? But they lead up to the events that are interesting. So it's kind of hard for me to remember. But there's this. Okay, so there's this dark elf, right? And he basically steals away um, an elf woman. He basically traps her in his woods, and she keeps looking around trying to figure out a way out of the woods. And he's manipulating the woods so that she can't. Eventually, he makes it so that she finds him, his house, right? Um, they sleep together. They have a child. The child looks more like the Noldor. Wait, regardless, they leave. The elf woman who was trapped in the woods that has the baby from this dark elf dude, they end up leaving, right? And then he pursues them. And he follows them. It's actually Aol. Aol is his name. House of Aol is like that's the in Return of the King, Two Towers. I can't remember if it's in Fellowship. Um, the dude Theoden, King Theoden, the guy who's got Grim of Worm tongue and manipulating his mind. He looks like shit, and then Gandalf shows up and heals him. He's I don't know if he's related to this guy Aol, but he's from House Aol, and that name is the same. So Aol is this dude who's chasing down his wife that he initially kidnaps at first, and then the son that she has with him. Right? They escape him. He follows them to this kingdom, and basically, there's a king elf there, and he's like, "Look, he tells Aol like, you can't have basically, it's my rule here, right?" And they was like, "Nah, fuck that. This is my wife. This is my child. Whatever rules you have don't apply here because give me back my shit." So then he obviously says no. So what ends up happening is they have sort of like a standoff, right? And then Aol throws a spear. He has like a spear under his cloak, pulls it out of nowhere, throws it at his son, right? And his wife jumps in the way and gets clipped by the spear. So he obviously Aol is then I think he's struck down then. So it's kind of interesting. Like this guy Aol, if he is, and I'm gonna find out obviously because I'm reading the Silmarillion, if Aol is related, because like I don't fucking know. I need to keep reading. But yeah, so anyway, what ends up happening is the Aol's wife is related to the king in the city they ran to, right? The king in the city ends up falling in love with her. He wants to fuck her, right? But he thinks like, oh, that's something that even elves, they're too closely related because yeah, I don't know. Pretty interesting though. I'm gonna find out what happens, obviously. But this one elf wanted to fuck someone who's like basically his sister. So incest, similarities, names, right? Um, Okay, so let's do this. Which ways are Lord of the Rings better, and which ways are House of the Dragon, A Song of Ice and Fire better? Right. So to start with, Lord of the Rings has hope. Lord of the Rings is not a light tale, right? It's not like you know, like I guess RPG fantasy kind of. It's not technically like that. It's actually pretty edgy. It's actually really edgy, right? So one of the things that does not happen in the Two Towers is the enemy, right? When they're held out at Helm's Deep, uh, the enemy throws heads over the walls of all of the slain combatants. And it's mentioned that some of the people who are witnessing this, who are behind the walls of Helm's Deep, end up seeing people they know, right? So the Lord of the Rings books are pretty dark. The movies are pretty dark too, but um, you know that's interesting. So it's not completely like a lighthearted tale, but there is hope in the sense that they defeat the Dark Lord, right? There's the scouring of the Shire, which let's talk about that for a second. People always go Lord of the Rings. The biggest thing with the Lord of the Rings movies is that they left out the scouring of the Shire. Let me turn down my mic a little bit because I keep redlining and I can't. I don't have the chat up, so I can't see if did the chat refresh yet? Nope, still didn't refresh. So can't see if I'm talking too loud. But so the scouring of the Shire is basically Grimma and Sauron getting their revenge on the hobbits, right? So obviously, evil is defeated, and I'm gonna get back to the point where I was making about how Lord of the Rings is seemingly better than A Song of Ice and Fire because it has hope. It's a hopeful tale. That is, the light is something that's completely missing from Song of Ice and Fire. Reading it constantly over and over again makes you actually become a bit depressed, right? Uh, Speaking from firsthand experience. Um, oh yeah, by the way, this hat is from a user named Destiny P420. Thank you for that. And then also this painter right there, that's from my boy Jay Fox out of the UK. He just sent me a bunch of images of this mural that he did for a client, and it's Jon Snow facing off against in the Battle of the Bastards. Right, the mural is Jon holding Longclaw, and then 1,000 fucking knights coming towards him. Amazing! I can't wait till he posts it on his thing so I can share it. I think he told me I could share it on my stories, but he said he wanted to wait until like when he finishes. He did it for a dude's man cave. But so anyway, all right, where was I? Hope, right? Oh, scouring of the Shire, right? So people always, I've been a Lord of the Rings movie fan since they came out, right? And people all like as I've gotten older, and for instance, when I was at Con of Thrones, in 2017, really cool, right? It's this convention that does Game of Thrones stuff. I actually got invited up to this like party. The people that were throwing it, they had like was like towards the end of the event, they had this party at like this penthouse thing, and it was at the Opryland in Nashville. It was a really nice hotel, right? I got to party with young Hodor, Liza Aaron, and a couple of other people that are associated with the show, like one of them, Paula Fairfield, the sound designer, right? We're everybody's all partying. There's probably like maybe 25, 30 people. What the fuck was the point? What was I getting at? Oh, yes. At the okay, so I partied with some Game of Thrones people. Yes, no, that wasn't the point. The point was I got into a conversation with people who were Lord of the Rings fans, and we were talking about Lord of the Rings fans. They were surprised that I was a Lord of the Rings fan and kind of thought that, like, I think I said something stupid like, no way that the books are better than the movies. The movies are amazing. Everybody always says how faithful they were. So whatever the fuck. So anyway, he tells me like, no, and then obviously multiple people have told me this since then. It's like, have you heard of the scouring of the Shire? I'm like, no, what the fuck is that? What do people like? What happens? Like, and then he explained like, this, and that, right? And because the movies left that out, uh, it'll never be. I don't remember the exact point. Everybody was drunk. We were all drunk and fucked up. But anyway, it set up like the scouring of the Shire to be this dark event, right? Because I had been told about it from other people who had read it, and they were like, "Yeah, it's a pretty dark moment that was left out of the movies." Here's the thing: I've read the Scouring of the Shire. It's not that dark. Basically, what ends up happening is Sauron in the movies is at the Tower of Orthanc. Grima Wormtongue does what he does in the books, right? He literally well, that's not true. In the books, he slits his throat. In the movie, he like stabbed him a bunch of times and he falls off the tower, right? So Saruman and Grima Wormtongue, when Orthanc Tower is attacked by the Ints, Gandalf actually lets them go. Like he's locked in the Tower of Orthanc. They get the keys to it. They kick him out of the tower. Gandalf destroys his staff, and he's like, "Look, you're no longer a threat. Fuck off." Right? Uh, I think the idea is that it's more of a punishment to exist in Middle Earth and not have the same abilities or be the same person you were. Right? I guess I don't know. So anyway, Grima Wormtongue and Saruman are beggars. So when Sauron is defeated, uh, Gandalf and the entirety of the Fellowship that survive are making their way back to the Shire, and Gimli and Legolas end up going to look because Gimli wanted to show Legolas the glittering caves or whatever. So he's like, let's go look in these woods of Fangor, which is this like stretch of woods that Legolas has never seen. So him and Gimli go and travel over there, and then Gandalf travels with the hobbits to the Shire, right? So on their way, they're pretty close. I think they're near Bree. They discover this beggar on the side of the road who is with another beggar, right? And then they start talking to him, and they realize, oh shit, it's Sauron and Grima Wormtongue, right? And they're asking for money and shit because they're a beggar. I think Peregrine or maybe Marietta. I can't remember. I think it's Peregrine. Peregrine offers him South Farthing's finest pipe weed tobacco. He's like, here you go. I don't got that much of it. I found it at Isengard because they find like Saruman's personal stash room, and um, that's where the tobacco is in the movie. But in the books, it's floating down a river, and they just sort of grab it. And they're like, South Farthing, that's a part of the fucking that's a part of the Shire. What is this doing here? So Saruman had spies in the Shire that were giving him, that pipe weed, right? So I actually just did a video on this yesterday. Pipe weed came over from Numenor, the Westermen came over and brought it. But the hobbits were the first one to thought to put it in a clay pipe and a wood pipe and smoke it, right? So the Westermen would just sort of burn it for fragrances, for smells. The hobbits were the first one to be like, nah, let's inhale that shit, bro. So anyway, uh, and then obviously getting back on track here, Peregrine gives, I think it's Peregrine, I don't know, gives Saruman the little bit of South Farthing's finest weed that he has. And then obviously Saruman's a dickhead, so he's like, yeah, you better give me that. It's a small payment for what you stole from me. Saruman's so delusional, he thinks that he did nothing wrong, right? So then they sort of just fuck off from there. Gandalf is like, ha ha ha. They continue on to the Shire. And then Gandalf stops in Bree because he wants to go see, can't remember the damn bartender's name, but he wants to go visit somebody. So the hobbits continue on to the Shire, unaware of the fact that there's some potential threat or danger, right? So they get to the Shire and they see that it's blocked off, and they're like, what the fuck, right? So they recognize the dude who's keeping the gate, and the guy explains to them, yo, there's this dude known as Sharky, um, and he's got a bunch of ruffians, men from the road that came in and sort of took over the Shire. They burned hobbit holes, they displaced families, they killed hobbits, they basically brought order to a place that was already the Shire itself having existed, didn't need these guys to sort of show up and start fucking everything up. They started depleting the wealth and all that stuff. So anyway, obviously when Sam and Peregrine and Meriadoc and Frodo get back, they're not down with that. So they basically force their way in, um, and then they get an army of Tooks, right? I think like 100 Tooks come from the hills and help them defeat. Uh, who we end up finding is Sauron and Grima Wormtongue. So basically, Sauron starts talking like in the final standoff. You find out that Sauron is Sharky. Um, he's going as Sharky. It's this alias that he's using, but Sauron is the one who put up um, like basically he's causing most of the problems in the Shire. So there's a standoff, and then Saruman starts talking out of his neck about Grima, and then out of nowhere, Grima pulls a blade, just sort of drops out of his sleeve, right, pierce from nowhere. He pulls it out and then cuts Saruman's neck, and that's how Saruman dies. And then as soon as Grima does this and Saruman dies, he starts to run off, but then Hobbits puts 2 arrows in him, and then Grima dies that way. So that's the scouring of the Shire. It is dark, and yes, what ends up happening afterwards is Sam finds out that all of these trees are pulled up and felled, and like the entire Shire is sort of desolated. So what he ends up doing, what's really sad, and this actually makes sense too, is that Sam isn't sad that he won't be able to see the Shire how it's supposed to be. He's sad that it won't look the same until his grandchildren are old enough. So his kids, the kids that he has with fuck, is her name Brandy? I can't remember Sam's wife's name, but anyway, um, yeah. So what he does is oh, this is a difference from the Lord of the Rings books to the movies. In the movies, um, Sam is gifted by Galadriel. Is it daggers? Is it 2 daggers? Because she gives those to Pippin and Mary in the books. But in the book, she gives Sam this box that's got earth, filament, soil from her garden, right? So Sam is like, oh, this is awesome. This box of dirt is amazing, right? It's like a really fine powdery dust. And she tells him, put it in your garden when you return to the Shire, and you'll have the best looking garden around. So what Sam ends up doing is taking out the box when they get to the very end of the story in the Return of the King, the scouring of the Shire. He ends up taking a small pebble of sand from the box that was gifted to him by Galadriel and places it in each tree that he plants all over the Shire. So Sam rebuilds the Shire. Sam, let's get back on track here. Sam in A Song of Ice and Fire, Samwell Tarly, will probably do something similar to that in the sense that he's going to the Citadel to train. He's going to discover a bunch of secret knowledge that is kept secret, I guess, because it's dangerous, but potentially no one either knows about it or sort of the world has forgotten about it. And Sam will likely, you know, bestow. Sam has already ran into, let's see, Arya. He's ran into Bran. He's ran into Cold Hands. He knows Jon Snow. He's now at the Citadel. He knew Maester Aemon, right? All these magical individuals, and then most importantly, Maester Marwyn. He knows Maester Marwyn, and Maester Marwyn's going to go meet with Daenerys right now. So Sam has connections all over the world. Sam in A Song of Ice and Fire. What he's going to do is the knowledge that he's learning at the Citadel, he's going to bestow a little bit of that knowledge with each one of those characters when their story crosses paths again and repair the world, much like what Sam does in the Shire. Damn, Sir Hunt's is good as shit. I didn't even know I was going to be making that point until I just started this. Let me heat up my espresso, though. I'll be right back. I'm just stepping right over there. Lots to drink more coffee. All right. So yeah, we did that, right? So let me look at my notes here. Okay. So the getting back to the which way is Lord of the Rings are better, which way is Song of Ice and Fire is better. So for one, Lord of the Rings has hope. It's missing for a large chunk of George's books until you read certain POV characters, and even then, a glimpse of hope in A Song of Ice and Fire in George's world also comes with a shit ton of dark, right? So there is light in George's books, there is hope in his books, but it ultimately doesn't amount to too much because there's so much dark to it, right? So that's one way that Lord of the Rings is better. But here's one of the ways that A Song of Ice and Fire is better. Uh, Sex. Game of Thrones has sex. That's missing from Lord of the Rings. And I don't necessarily agree with the way that George writes sex scenes, but I find it hard to believe. Well, no, he doesn't. That's not true. Tolkien doesn't say that they don't do it. He just doesn't describe it like George does. But that's one of the ways the Game of Thrones, one of Lord of the Rings, is George's graphically realistic sex scenes. No, let me come up with a better way to put that, a more nuanced perspective. That's the point, is that Game of Thrones has sex, Lord of the Rings doesn't. And it's one of the ways that it's better, but it's not just like gratuitous sex and violence and stuff, because Lord of the Rings has plenty of violence. Actually, because of how the story is set up structurally, when the violence happens, it's actually more impactful. The violence in George's Song of Ice and Fire books is nonstop. So he has to get exceedingly more violent in his descriptions of scenes because he's sort of trying to one up himself. Violence in Game of Thrones is more exciting to read, though, in my opinion. But since Tolkien wrote these books in the 1930s, Lord of the Rings fight scenes, like when one person will whip out a sword and spring into action, that's mostly how like Tolkien uses his action verbs, like sprung off of a horse or sprung into battle, flew over a mountain, because Balrogs can fly. Hithlum, look it up. Balrogs flew over Hithlum to go whoop this bitch named Angolian's ass to go save Morgoth. Balrogs can fly. Um, Game of Thrones has sex. That's how one of the ways is better than Lord of the Rings. And then another one, right? This is gonna piss some people off, but Lord of the Rings is finished. The main story from the start of the third age, or I'm sorry, the start of when the story starts in the third age to the end of the third age, and then beyond, is done. We don't know anything about the events past A Dance with Dragons in the sample chapters we got for the Winds of Winter. Tolkien took it a step further, not just wrote the end to Return of the King, but then also in the appendices, you get a bunch of information in the Return of the King, at least the version that I have on my Audible account. In the appendices, you get a bunch of information. Like, you find out that Sam's great grandson is the one who finally finishes, I guess, the Red Book. And also, Aragorn lives to be 190. And then once he dies, right, Arwen goes into the woods and then just sort of dies. Like, she spends one more winter in the woods, and then just lays down and dies. So, like, you get the fate of all of these characters, and then you get their story version ending too, and then you go a little bit more, and that's one of the ways Lord of the Rings is better than Game of Thrones. In A Song of Ice and Fire, Tolkien took 30 years or something to write this story. George has been writing his book for about 30 years. It'll be 30 years in 2024. Wait, right? Yeah, because 20 years is 2014. First book came out in 1996. So it'll be 30 years in 2026. Damn, that's crazy. Kids born in 1996 are going to be turning 30. I mean, I'm already 33, but I was born in the first day of the 90s. Technically, I'm an 80s baby because most of my in utero-ness was in the 80s. That's why I love 80s. Okay, here's another one. Here's a way that A Song of Ice and Fire is better. George is still writing his story because of how detailed the world is, how big and filled out it is. And that's not necessarily the case with Tolkien's Legendary. All right, so hear me out. He filled out the world, and I'm still. Let me look exactly. I'll tell you right now to show you how much I have left of the Silmarillion. I have 8 hours left. Oh shit! I just started playing. And let's see. I have 8 hours left, and the entirety of it is 15 hours roughly, 14 hours, 49 minutes. And I've had to backtrack quite a bit. I'd probably be, you know, instead of 8 hours into it, I'd probably be more around 10 or so hours into it. But I keep having to backtrack. So what I've gotten so far is a lot of information, a lot of names, but ultimately the names aren't as significant and as meaningful in A Song of Ice and Fire. So George uh, will name a character Bran the Builder, right? Bran the Builder, when you look into World of Ice and Fire, is accredited with building this, this, and that, right? And then when you read the main story, you realize that he may have actually been um, like even more of a historical figure than we get. Like, okay, so let me end the point right there. Bran the Builder is this historical figure, and we get a list of a lot of the things that he did and what house he's from, and um, potentially how the events that he took part in the past can affect the future, like when the wall comes down, right? So Bran the Builder supposedly built the wall. He supposedly helped, and this isn't necessarily mainstream Westerosi history accepted by the Maesters because of the time frame difference. But supposedly, Bran the Builder helped um, in the construction of Storm's End, right? So when Storm's End was being constructed, it was to defy the Storm God by Durrandon, right? The founder of House Durrandon, and he, Bran the Builder supposedly helped lay the designs for that, right? So, when you're going through Westeros and you're looking at some of the greatest monuments, this dude Bran the Builder is associated with them, and we could find out through many different POVs more information about this dude, or maybe the final fate of what happened to him, right? So, jumping back to the Lord of the Rings, you'll get, and it's not fair because I haven't read all of the Silmarillion, but from what I've gotten so far, is you'll get a character whose name, but then that's it, right? Like the story sort of moves on and goes forward. Um, so in my opinion, like even though I just said Lord of the Rings is better because it's finished, A Song of Ice and Fire is sort of better because it's not finished. It's still being filled out. The world is so detailed. And that's one of the reasons why George did it is because he's such a Lord of the Rings fan, such a Tolkien fan that he wanted more from Tolkien's world. For instance, he was like, okay, so what was Aragorn's policy towards the orcs, right? At the end of the Return of the King, because there's tens of thousands of orcs. What did King Aragorn the first? What did he do to all of these remaining orcs? Did he commit mass genocide? Did he force the orcs out of Middle Earth somehow? Like what happened? You know what I mean? Uh, you don't really know. You don't know. You just know that Aragorn lived to be 190 and he died. You don't know his political policies. You don't know some of the wars that he may have potentially had to fight because technically, the type of world that Middle Earth is after the events of the scouring of the Shire and then also the war for the ring and all that stuff, it's a totally different world. It's dangerous, and also there's a bunch of allies of Mordor and followers of Sauron who are still kind of around. Not just the orcs too. There's men that were in. So George wanted to know all of that stuff, and that's why he did that with the Song of Ice and Fire, to make it so detailed and fill in a lot of backstory. And people will say that that's why he hasn't finished the books yet, is because he's sort of writing so much information. And like, yeah, that may be the case, but that's my opinion. Ultimately, makes Song of Ice and Fire more richer, right? Fortunately, Tolkien didn't get the, like, I guess, right, like, obviously he fought in World War I, right? So the time that he was writing in, it's not the same time period George is writing, obviously. Uh, so yeah. Um, but that could also, I could probably go back and argue that point for the other side too. So I kind of did beforehand. I mentioned, A Song of Ice and Fire not being finished. All right, so let's see. How many people do we have watching? Let's see. Go to my channel. All right, we got about 20 people watching. All right, so this was initially I was gonna delete it, but this has been 35 minutes. I've been able. Oh, the gray one's down here. Kitty, come here, kitty. Come here, kitty, kitty. Come here. Kitty, 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 kitty. Y'all can't see them, but they're down here. Kitty, 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 kitty. Come here, Batman. Come here, come here, kitty. Kitty, kitty. Batman, watch out, kitty. Come here. All right. Well, he don't want to come over here. You might see him walk by in the background, but yeah, initially, like I said, this is obviously new, not just the new format, but this is a new laptop, so I've had to update drivers. I've had to spend like 12 hours removing bloatware and just doing different things to get it ready to make videos. And I'm working on a video right now. It's like 2.5 hours long. It's a documentary style video. But I'll leave this up. I think it went pretty well. Let me know your thoughts on my points down below. Anybody who watches this afterwards and everybody who's watching now, thank you so much. Please slap a like on this. Like goal is going to be 420. And I'll probably do more of these because one of the benefits of reading, I'll do one for Dune. Let's do one for Dune. Let's do like a Dune, Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I don't know. It'd be fun. Talk about all three of those. It's a lot of information. Dune is standing out though. And honestly, it's because it's so much fantasy. Like I haven't just read A Song of Ice and Fire and the Lord of the Rings books. Also, Kingkiller Chronicles, right? Harry Potter books when I was a child. It's nice to get to Dune because Dune is a solid break from fantasy, but also it's very close to fantasy. But then it has spaceships, right? So there's actually a lot of people that would argue that the first Dune book is 100% fantasy, very little science fiction. And the reason being is because Frank Herbert himself hated science fiction at the time. One of the ways that Dune worked for him as writing it is he didn't want to think like what would technology be like 10,000 years from now, continuing with artificial intelligence and computers like it was during his time, right? He said, fuck that. Let me have this massive war so that all of the artificial intelligence is wiped out, and that even though it's 10,000 years in the future, it's more so primitive than it is, right? So that's why Dune was so amazing. But yeah, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, and subscribe. I'm losing subscribers. I'm not sure what the fuck is going on with YouTube, but I've been consistently losing subscribers since House of the Dragon ended. I don't know why. I mean, people say it's because of clickbait, but I haven't clickbaited in like 3 weeks, and I'm still losing subscribers. So I don't know, but I'm just gonna keep putting out videos. If you like my shit, please subscribe. If not, unsubscribe. Thank you for watching. Long night. And I was doing this for my video yesterday. I couldn't actually think of anything to say, right? So I just went Black Speech of Mordor. So yeah, I'll do that. Black Speech of Mordor. And Zel 3 is supposed